begin with, when most people use the term guitar feedback, they're actually using the phrase a bit wrong, or maybe more accurately, just not in its most complete form. This is due to the fact that at its most basic level, the term feedback is actually the mechanism used to control virtually any electronic device ever created. When it comes to the guitar sounds that people call guitar feedback, it's not a question of feedback, as that in itself is constant, but it's more of a question or an arrangement in the stability of the frequency. However, the reality remains that the term guitar feedback has taken on a bit of a negative connotation in terms of sound quality, so for the sake of not confusing people, we'll just stick with that term. The sound or noise that most people refer to as any sort of feedback, including guitar feedback, is almost always nothing more than the gain being turned up too high or some other issue involving the volume of the microphone or the guitar amp. In almost 99% of cases, the feedback is created by what's called the closing of a loop in the input-output. Or to put it simply, the noise coming out of the amplifier or the speakers is picked up by the microphone and therefore begins to loop itself. Or to put it even more simply, the sonic wave I'm talking about here is akin to what you would see when a dog starts to chase its tail. You might wonder why this doesn't always occur, as microphones are almost always present when there's a loudspeaker system. But it all comes down to the gain and mixing that I mentioned. This is where equalizers often come into play, as it allows sound engineers to adjust the specific levels or frequencies that might be causing feedback. This most common type of feedback can also be easily avoided by angling speakers correctly or just generally understanding the room you're working in. However, the entire scenario changes almost entirely when you're talking about guitars and guitar amps as opposed to just a microphone, as the instrument is able to send a variety of vibrations and other sounds, making any sort of standard mixing or balance almost impossible to employ across the board. It's the way that a guitar player can manipulate these resonances or vibrations that gives a guitar player his specific tone, and this is also where the actual construction, the pieces and parts used to make a guitar, can come into play. But much like a microphone loop can close due to imbalances in sound levels, the same can occur when a microphone is used to add even more amplification to a guitar amp, as is often the case in large-scale concert settings. In the case of electric guitars, the reason many musicians will move closer to their amp when they're having a feedback issue in a good way is because they're hoping that the built-in pickups in the guitar will pick up even more vibrations, adding even more sound and intensity to the noise. Yet, within modern guitars and amplifiers, there can also be issues related to magnetism that may add to even more feedback, but in almost every case, the core source of feedback is a closed loop. So while the way that the common term of feedback is used is almost always incorrect, its use in rock music for more than half a century just can't be overlooked. And it's amazing to think that such a significant and well-known part of rock and roll music comes from such a simple scientific theory.